right. Hello, friends. Welcome to the next episode of Scripting the Book. I am here with my co-host, and we have a special guest host with us today, Adrian from Books by Adrian. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. Before we get started, I'm going to let our guest host and then my lovely co-host introduce themselves. So, Adrian, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, my name is Adrian Santiago, and I run an online author platform called Books by Adrian. You can find me at booksbyadrian.com, through which you can find all parts of my author platform, including my books, The Death and Rebirth of Bella Erdman, as well as the main novel, Shadow of the Spark. This is the short story that leads into the bigger novel. Available ebook, paperback, and signed copies available through my Ko-fi. Everything found very easily through booksbyadrian.com, including all my social medias, my YouTube, etc., etc.
All right. Go ahead, Ben.
Awesome. And I'm Ben Pick. Every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. And I also have 2 books where I'm at a remote location, so I don't have them. But they're out there. So if you're interested, young adults, Portal, time travel, all the fun stuff. And I will see you Monday nights, 7 p.m.
Awesome. And Natalie.
And I'm Natalie Locke. I am a avid snacker, by the way, so I got here just in time. But I am also a mom, dog mom like Mia, and a mom like me. We have a lot of similarities here. Yep, there's one. He appears. It happens throughout the stream. But regarding my writing, because why not? I wasn't losing enough sleep. You can find most of my flash fictions on NatalieLockeBooks.com, as well as a prompt book coming out in 2024, co-authored with Chandra Arthur. Really excited for that, as well as we are signed with, I can never say it, Inimitable Books with Zara Hoffman. So it is a full-on friend to business partner collaboration, and I'm here for it.
Awesome.
I am here for it too. And I'm Nia the Vixen Fiction. You're here on my channel. I stream here on Tuesday nights, Writing Sprints. And I also stream on Twitch around the noonish hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you can catch me there. I host this fantastic show with my fabulous co-host, Scripting the Book. You can catch that once a month, usually one of the middle 2 Sundays of the month. And I also host AuthorTubers React with some of my other friends and co-hosts. And those are usually at the end of the month, the last weekend of the month. But we're off for the summer. So stay tuned when we do our comeback episode. We know what you did this summer. So it'll be fun. We'll talk about all of the stuff that's been going on, especially with the writer strike and all of this good stuff. But today we are here. Also, all my friends that you see here are linked down below. So if you're interested in any of the cool things that they do, the cool books that some of them have already written or have coming out, yes, they're perfection. Where is Ben's book? It's behind me. It was my sci-fi. I can't get it. I can't grab your book, Ben. Sorry. I'll grab it for the end.
Don't worry about it.
I'm like, my arms don't do this.
At least you have the physical book. I'm constantly pulling up, and I'm like, it's in my Kindle list, I swear.
I do that too. I hold up a Kindle with like the cover on it, and I'm like, it's not available on ebook. My Kindle's far from me at the moment, so I can't not do it.
And I will have something published hopefully soon. Fingers crossed. I need to focus. All right, but today, I know, get her done. That's what my husband says. Today we are here, though, to talk about Game of Thrones. We're going to talk about the first half. So books 1 through 3 and seasons 1 through 4. So first of all, everybody read. We're going to start with the book. There will be some book spoilers also. And one more disclaimer. If you were sensitive to any of the topics in Game of Thrones and did not want to watch it for that reason, this is probably not the show for you, because we are going to be discussing it. We are keeping everything PG-13, so we just want everybody to be aware. But we're going to be talking about it. So everybody read it? Yes. Any DNFers on the first part? Okay.
Just the third book. Just a third book. It's a timing thing, and it was not because it wasn't good. It was. I actually read these 3 years ago, and I read the first two audiobook. So read, as my husband calls it, but I discount that. And then I just didn't get to the third one, but I am familiar with a lot of the differences between it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are so thick. I mean, we're talking like 20-something hours. Actually, if I remember, it might be 30 hours.
I just did one.
Yeah, and I listen at 2 times speed, like, and it's still killing me. I got a job that I'm working on. I got kids interrupting me. Like, dude, I can't do this.
Yeah, I listen at 1.5, and I actually can listen faster than I read because I read as if someone's narrating it. So the narrator in my head reads just like people talk. So I'm like, oh, we need to go faster than this.
So the narrator in your head is Ben Stein.
Yeah. Articulating every word and just really making sure I understand. So yeah, that's the narrator in my head. I'm like, nah, narrator, you're not.
That's mine too. Yeah, that's mine too. I'm a fairly slow reader because of that. But I haven't really gotten into audiobooks yet. Like I haven't listened to too many. One or two here and there, but I gotta have the book. Even Kindles are challenging for me. I'd rather have the book in my hand.
Yeah, I think the reason why I do so well, and I've told people this before, is because I'm dyslexic. I've always loved audio stories, and I love reading along with my teachers when I was learning to read. When the teachers would read with us, it seemed like it just went smoother, and that's how I got the narrator in my head. Because the narrator will correct words that my brain isn't seeing right. I'll see it wrong. The narrator in my head, because they're actually saying the whole sentence to me, fixes the words before my eyes can fix it. So it's a weird thing. We didn't have this. We didn't know what dyslexia was when I was a kid. So I was just coping. Had no idea. Now I know.
Yeah.
I will say, with a cast this large, the audiobook is very advantageous for anybody to go to. The downside of doing an audiobook instead of the physical book or the electronic book is if I remember, the first few pages has the family tree. You want to refer to back to that a few times to keep things straight. So you might be able to differentiate the characters, but being able to remember who's related to who, because relationships is not very blurred with relations and such. So
and there's a couple of characters with the same name too.
Yes.
The same name. Yeah. There we go. That way. So that's just audiobook wise, but yeah, that's why I DNF'd, because it was years ago, and my son's calling out to me right now, so I'm gonna go on mute.
Yeah, well, I will pick that up and say I thought I was going to DNF for the exact same reason, just time wise. For me, this is my first time reading the series. I have a hard time reading a series when I know it's a series and it's not finished. So I was like, well, I'm not going to read these till the series is done. And
that's
not going to work for you anymore.
Yeah, that really wasn't going to work. So since we decided to do this, I was like, you know what? I'm going to break my own rule and go ahead.
Thank you.
And I will be disappointed with everybody else.
Yes, you will be. It's fine.
I will.
Misery loves company.
Exactly. But I just finished it last night because I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'm only
at what time? 3 a.m.
No. I finished it. I was on Writertown, the Write-a-thon with
Writertown Junction. But no, he called it something else. Michael called it. It started with the G.
Is this one Garlosia? I think this was the Garlosia one.
Yeah.
So I was on that, and I finished all my word counts and all that stuff. So then after that, I went ahead and supposed to be having movie time with the fam. I was like, audiobook in the ear. Let me go ahead and finish it, because I didn't have very much to go. So I was like, man, I really didn't want to DNF when I only had like 5 more chapters to read. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went ahead and finished it. Glad I did. So I was very close to being a DNF for time reasons. I underestimated my ability to read. I'm like, I read chunky fantasy all the time.
They're really
it was
chunky.
A lot. I was like, oh, I need a break. And not because they weren't good. So we're going to get into the next thing we do, which we like to do. Find out where we stood on the books and why. Was anybody a dislike?
No.
Anybody neutral on it? Anybody alike?
Sorry, Adrian.
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry, Adrian. And
That's why we brought you on
Yay!
here.
We're so glad. We're so glad. Okay, so we'll start since you have the higher opinion. Why are we out of love?
You know, I read a lot of thrillers and murder mysteries, and I watch a lot of sci-fi, but the majority of my fantasy intake, for the most part, is in film. And so the few times that I go into books, it's usually for the big ones, your Lord of the Rings, you know, the classics that everybody kind of should read, you know. And I didn't know about Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, rather, until the first season of the show came out. And I watched the first season with my roommate, and it blew my mind. And I found out it's based on a novel series. So I was like, I got to read the novel. So I read the first novel and fell so much deeper in love with the book version of everything. Even having watched the first season first, the book was so much richer to me. And I love the first season. I know we're going to get to that, but I love the first season of Game of Thrones. But the books just delve so much deeper. All the stuff with the dire wolves, all the stuff with like the mythical astronomy stuff that we're going to talk about later. All of these like layers that are missing from the show make the book such an incredible and unique experience. And at the same time, it felt familiar to me. You know, dire wolves, I know what those are. Dragons, I know what those are. Like, these things are familiar to me. But I just felt like I was walking around in a world I had never been in. And it was such a juxtaposition. Felt good on both ends. It's just weird like that. So these first three books, in my eyes, you know, can do no wrong. They're masterpieces. I have, you know, more critique of the fourth and fifth books, but these first three, man, like, I just love them so very much. And they were such an experience. And they were such an experience that after reading the first book, I just went ahead and read the whole series. I didn't even wait for season 2 of the show. I was at first worried about reading ahead, but once I finished the first book, I was like, I can't stop. Like, I got to keep going. It was, you know, it was a good gateway drug to A Song of Ice and Fire.
And how many times have you read it since?
I didn't even bother reading it for this because I've read them that many times. I've read them.
Many times.
Yeah, like I've read the entire series at least 3 times all the way through. But then I'll also go back and do like just certain character read-throughs. Like, I'll get in a mood where I'm like, I just want to read all Bran chapters for a while. And I'll just go through and read all the Bran chapters of all the books and just get like Bran's story. And I'll just, you know, I'll get a hankering.
That makes one of us.
Dive into it. Yeah, it's
Bran is like the one character I don't want to read.
I love Bran chapters.
Oh, we have to talk.
I love them so much.
I gotta hear your insight on this of why.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. So yeah, I love it.
So the rest of us were alike on it. Ben, why were you alike?
Yeah, so I'm in a very similar situation as Adrian, where I vaguely knew of A Song of Ice and Fire, and then the first season of Game of Thrones came out, and I started watching it with my friends because I didn't have HBO at the time, so I would go over to their house, and it would be this huge celebration. And so then we get done with the first season, and I decide, you know, I need to go back and read the books. And I read the first book in less than a week, and then I finished the rest of the series at the time. So it was books 2, 3, and 4 within a month. Mm-hmm. And it is fantastic. There is no doubt in my mind that this is a stellar series, but at the same time, it starts even early on. There are just the cracks in there. So it's like we get a little. There's a rotating point of view for the narration, so we get little pieces of the puzzle here and there, and we're putting pieces together. And very early on, it feels like, well, it's exponentially getting to be a bigger and bigger puzzle until we won't ever get to a good ending in sight, or it'll be, you know, 100 pages before we get back to like the character that we were trying to recall this. So
yeah,
I guess in the pre-show we were talking about how we need to memorize all the different characters, and how there's the family trees that we need to look at the beginning, and all the different all the different houses put together. And without the show, I would have been utterly lost. So I watched the first season, so I kind of have a vague idea of who
It does help
how all the pieces fit together. And without that, like I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have really even been as drawn into certain characters as I was in the show, because of the show. It tells you like this person is important. Whereas in the book, you have entire characters who are like, well, this storyline doesn't necessarily come into play. I mean, it will 2 books later, but it doesn't necessarily come into play now. Or it's just, hey, this is the world building, and this is how this one specific house fits together. So,
I mean, think about how long Tywin is a off-screen character in the books. You don't see him; you just hear about him.
Yes,
and he's doing all kinds of things that are radically changing the story, and you've never met him, you've never seen him. Like that's
and
totally.
That's a situation where it works. Where like, oh, you hear about this person, and he's got this massive presence, and he's changing the geography of the political geography and everything. But then there's other characters like who was it? The Jester, who I didn't really like those moments.
You talk about Patchface? Which one? There's a lot.
Yeah,
Patchface. Okay.
Yeah. So
I have
Adrian is our memory bank here.
I have a soft spot in my heart for
that was going to be a hard one for me. I've got like my name list up because I'm like, I am not going to remember. I'm like, the one who did the thing. That's going to be me a lot. Natalie, why were you at a like? For this
really, it's just so vast and kind of the same reasons as Ben, but I do appreciate the in-depth stories, like, because as writers, we're supposed to, even if a character's on the screen for a little bit, you're supposed to know why they're on screen, what are their goals, what are their aspirations and stuff. And I say screen, but page. And to me, it's kind of you can see the in-depth like brainweb that occurred to create this world, and the diversity of the characters, the cultures and such. And I find that fascinating. And I appreciate it. As someone who doesn't write fantasy or anything, I appreciate the level of effort to try to make something appear different than the world we know, when actually most of your inspiration is coming from the world we know. Which my mother made a comment. She's like, I just don't like fantasy. It's all of racism and stuff. And I'm like, Mom, you do realize fantasies are just a snapshot of society today.
Bless her heart. That's so sweet.
I know, exactly. We're from Georgia. I said bless her heart to her face. Luckily, I did not get smacked or anything.
Yeah,
I was like, Mom,
you don't bless your heart, Mom.
Yeah, no.
But we had a chat about it and stuff. But I will say it's I think it's for someone who doesn't read fantasy, it is a struggle to get over for how vast it is and how confused I got as a reader. But I can appreciate the writer, and I appreciate the story. So it helps if I look at each chapter as like a flash fiction versus as this in-depth story. Because I'm also the type of person where I'm impatient, and if you're going to give me, like, I'm in the middle of Arya's story and then you jump to Bran just traveling, I'm like, I'm gonna skip it. You're driving me crazy. Can we get back to the action, please? This is not working for me. So but that's just, I recognize it's a personal thing, and I still see it. I see it as right up there where it's going to become a classic, especially if it's actually finished. But it's going to become a classic and be right up there with The Lord of the Rings, Dune, like some of these like foundational stories of fantasy.
I don't think so anymore, but we'll get to that in the part 2 discussion.
Ooh. Yeah. All right.
Okay. And Mia? I was at a like for sure. So when I read fantasy, my fantasy reading is usually for the fun and adventure. And so this happens to me a lot. I was going to be this way with not just this one, but also like Six of Crows. Some of the topics are very heavy. The ages of the characters sometimes bother me for the things that they have to go through. So those things I'm like, oh, I don't know. So I really have to like get in the right headset to read that kind of stuff. So at first I was just kind of like, I don't know if I'm even gonna read these, because I had heard about Game of Thrones or of Song of Ice and Fire, and then the show was coming out, and once I get used to the idea that these are some of the themes, I'm usually like, okay, let's go. And they usually turn out to be some of my favorite books. It just takes me sometimes to warm up to, this is going to be a heavy fantasy. It's not going to be,
you got to be mentally prepared.
Yeah, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
they're going to break my heart. I'm going to be like trying to gather up the children and save them, in my head, like, child, run for your life. I'm like, okay.
And you can't.
Bad things are going to happen to the children. It's going to be okay. Bad things are going to happen to the dragons. It's going to be fine. Once I get over that, then we don't know what. But once I get over that, then I usually am able to go into the book and, and enjoy it. And those do turn out, some of those ones with the heavier themes, as you can see by my top row, turn out to usually be some of my favorites. The light and fun ones, which I also love, I like those too. Those are the ones I just want to feel good. But that's how I usually like my fantasy. And this is heavier, and the children.
Like it's unexpected. I like the unexpected.
Yeah.
You can't assume where it's gonna go, but once it unfolds of why it went that way, you're like, oh, there were so many hints up to this point. Like we're knowing this character. Oh, by the way, I watched this show entirely, then read the books. Just letting you know.
The same.
Like full on all the way to the end of
season
8?
Like I didn't even start the show until it ended, because I'm that person where when something's I'll call it a fad or whatever, I don't watch. I don't want to join the office conversations. I don't want, I hate it. And everything. I did that with Lost. I did that with Game of Thrones. I did that with How I Met Your Mother.
I love
like
Lost.
All these shows.
Adrian, we are going to disagree all over the place.
I love Lost till the end. Man, I hung in there.
All these shows that everyone loved and was pushing, I got pushed and I just became a brick wall. So I waited till the show ended and then I watched it and binged because I'm impatient as well.
All right.
Yeah,
and
I got some fun stories about that when we switch over to the show.
All right.
Yeah.
So Chad, what's Chad doing right now?
Yeah. The story detective Robert is agreeing with Ben here. And by book 3, we're leaping forward, backwards, all over the road. Yes. Yep. Masterfully structured. It did so good. So let's go ahead and get into the actual discussion of I moved those out of order. Here we go. Thoughts on the book series 1 through 3 of Song of Ice and Fire. And there will be some book spoilers, guys. You're here. So we're going to do our best not to ruin something big if you're really looking forward to reading it. But when we're talking about the weaving of the characters and the thought that goes into it, I immediately think of something that I absolutely love to see in a story is that we meet was it who was the guy who spilled the stuff and then he became Joffrey's jester. He's like, you're gonna be the fool. So we meet
Dantos.
Yes. And then, so we meet this character. He gets saved by Sansa, basically. And then we're going to see this character later. You know what I mean? But it's just a snapshot. And
they become so much more important later.
That becomes so much. Yes, exactly. So these types of things, the little details, the little nuggets that you get, the thought that goes into weaving all of this in, I really appreciate that. So those are some of my thoughts from the book. You can tell even from the beginning. Yeah, it's a lot, and I am glad that I watched the series first, because it is a lot, but the world is so well done for everything that they're trying to do. And it is hard, especially with characters, I talk about this sometimes when we're in the head or in the perspective of one character, and it's like, I really don't want to be talking about this character right now. I want to be hanging out with this other character. So that does happen, but it's usually tends to be important. And I think, especially with the first couple books, he did a really good job. I'm invested in what each of these characters are going through, and seeing
you can see how this built up. And that's probably why the first 3 books are so well done, is because he was thinking about them for a long time,
Mhm.
and then they became popular, and then I think he started to speed up a little bit.
Yeah, the whole thing, like even with Theon, to see Theon where he begins, where he goes, and then the whole process, and you go through this this process of, okay, do we like Theon? I think he's okay. Oh my gosh, Theon, what are you doing? Okay, Theon, we hate you. And then it's like, Theon, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
you really go through it with these characters. And like, and you almost feel like, man, I hated this character. Now I kind of feel bad for them. How are you making me feel bad for a character that I feel like even though he's not betraying me, I feel betrayed. You know, and I feel betrayed. That's good.
Same thing with Cersei.
Yeah,
Cersei.
he's masterful with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Jamie. Jamie becomes such a
Jamie,
sympathetic character, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
he, you know, I know that we're supposed to be minor spoilers. I mean, this is the setup to the entire series, but he pushes Bran out a window. You know what I mean? Like the dude pushes Bran,
I never
a
thought
child,
An
out a
8-year-old child in the book?
8-year-old child out a window. My son is 8. My oldest son is 8.
Yes,
He pushed
without even giving
my
us
kid
a
out a
line.
window. And
Yeah.
and 2 books later, I'm feeling for the guy and I just want the best for him. Like
They really, the books show how everything is gray. Like there is no one perfect, but I will say there is pure evil too.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I find that interesting that there is like pure evil, but even then there's
But there's no pure good.
There's no pure good. And with the pure evil, there's still the drive to please the father, their own father, and everything. So you can kind of understand why this person is as evil as they are, like what their drive is.
On the topic of the whole good and evil thing, it's interesting because if you look at a character like Eddard Stark, he is flawed in and of himself, of course. So we can't hold him up on a pedestal as pure good. However, throughout the course of the series, everything that we learn about what he did and why with him always comes back to what is honorable. It may not be the most good thing to do. It might even be a bad thing to do, but it keeps his honor intact.
He'll sully his name to protect.
And that's the other thing, is that he'll sully the public's opinion of his honor. But he's actually holding on to his honor. He's doing the most honorable thing he can do, even though everyone else is spitting at him. So is he pure good? No, but he's kind of pure.
He's
honor.
actually the closest to good that we have.
Yeah,
for
he's
the
like
story.
He's the closest thing to like the role model in this.
And you don't know how good.
And the other thing is,
and I think the only reason is maybe because his life is cut short with and everything, and it shocks us as the readers, at the other characters. It shocks us and everything. Like it is the first of like, here's your taste of what the rest of the series is going to be like.
Yeah,
but it's definitely. Hold on, buddy. Dude, you were quiet the whole time I was mute. Hold on. But it definitely, I feel like it's that phrase. I forget what movie or show or did it first, but it was like, live long enough to see your heroes become the villains and
Dark
stuff.
Knight.
The Dark Knight.
Thank you. I was like, I wanted to say that, but I was like, I'd rather be, I don't know, than wrong.
Yeah. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, and I feel like that's almost the entire character, and then like, and even live long enough for villains to become heroes. Like that is like the whole theme of this story of how it's an ebb and flow. There's no real end from hero to villain, from good to evil. Like it's, you're just constantly up and down, which actually, I mean, that's life.
Yeah.
Like, and fantasy takes snapshots of life. But yeah, I would say Ned is like the closest to good we have.
Yeah.
And he still makes not makes bad decisions, but does decisions that other people would deem bad.
That's the other part of Ned, right? Is that he may be the most honorable, but this is not an honorable society. It is not made for the honorable to flourish and thrive. the honorable die. And
I mean,
he is
everybody
the most
dies.
honorable. Yes,
Yes.
but the honorable most of all. Just
Right.
because, like think about the Hound when he's with Arya and they stop at this dude's place and he feeds them and
Yeah.
clothes them, and the Hound's first thought is to kill this dude and steal all his stuff. And it's like, this guy was nice to you, man. Like, this
Yep.
is an honorable dude doing honorable things, and your instinct is, well, he's weak, I'm going to take everything from him.
It's also that he could sell the information of their whereabouts too.
That too.
Yeah.
So there is some self-preservation. It's not
side.
entirely let me steal his stuff. There's some hints of self-preservation.
Yeah, he thinks that the guy will be taken advantage of later. But he thinks himself merciful to take care of it himself versus letting someone else do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or that they're just going to die anyway because they can't survive. They're not going to make it.
Yeah. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. There are so I enjoy so much the fantastical elements. We've got like the dire wolves, and I always was wondering as I'm reading, am I going to get, we'll talk about the show, am I going to be able to get more insight into the whys and the hows of what is going on? Like, why are we having these dreams? Why does he have the sight, the Raven's eye or whatever? And Arya,
we are walking or something.
Yeah.
Warging.
I know it was called something. I'm like, what was that thing?
Yeah, they're wargs. All the Stark children are wargs.
Yes. The weird thing with Arya, I'm like, we're bringing in these supernatural elements, and I like it. And I'm like, I want to know where this is going.
And he starts it off, he like dials it up as you go along.
Yes.
Like he really starts you at a simmer and then like turns it up throughout the books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry,
and that's exactly right. Like, you get these little bit of touches of it, and then it gets more and more as we're going along.
Gross.
And it's just like, okay, I'm starting to see what's happening now. But then you're like, how does this work with whatever's coming? These things that you just get glimmers of. What are these things? These little monster, like, I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, I know I watched the show, but I'm reading the book like, you know what I mean? I'm like, that's really good, because usually I watch a show and then I read the book. I'm like, okay, yeah.
And with the book, we get a lot of the backstory to strengthen why the character is who they are, which can't really be conveyed in a show except with a flashback.
Which they almost never did. They only had one or two flashbacks throughout the entire series. In fact, in the first like 5 or 6 seasons, they never had one. Yeah, they specifically didn't want to do that. I was gonna say the reason I've read them so many times, they are written in a way that rewards rereading. Not just with some of the things you guys have mentioned, like little nuggets that he plants early on and they grow into big trees, and like you get to see it again and understand what he was doing this time. But more than that, and I know that we'll have like a whole section about this, but I just want to kind of lay the groundwork. He's essentially telling you 3 different stories at the same time in every single chapter. And every time you read it, you get more and more of each one. So obviously you have what's currently going on in the story, the current events of each chapter. You also have the history of Westeros, right? He's telling you what happened with the houses before, why they hate each other, who betrayed who, all those past things, as far back as 100, 300 years ago. In some cases, he tells you all of that stuff. So you're getting the big picture of the political landscape of Westeros and the world in general through these, like, oh, this is what happened then, and this is what happened then. But then he's telling a third story, and the third story is, why is this world so weird? The seasons last for years. There's something weird about that. And the entire Song of Ice and Fire is trying to explain to you why that is. It's all tied into the mythical astronomy that he's setting up, that he's telling you. And so the actions that each character takes, the scenarios that they find themselves in, are all retellings of things that have happened in the stars. And you have to pick his clues apart to put that story together.
Predestination is what they believe.
Not so much predestination. It's more like this has happened, and what we're living in now reflects what happened. And nobody remembers what happened. But if we all analyze what's going on right now, we can figure that out. So it's like it's a whole third story. I can sum it up in one scene, actually, and it's in the first book. It's when Daenerys is with her handmaidens. I forget what they're called. They're not called handmaidens because they're Dothraki, but they, they're tending to her, and they're all talking about, the moon and how the moon is an egg, and 1,000 dragons poured out of it or whatever. And the other one's like, oh, that's silly. Everyone knows that the moon is the sister wife to the sun, and there used to be 2 moons, and they were, both married to the sun. Think of every Targaryen king.
Yep.
A golden-haired male with 2 brides, sisters to himself, the sun and 2 moons. There used to be 2 moons. Now there's only 1. And when that one was destroyed, dragons poured out. That's the story. But what if what we're really hearing is you have the sun, the 2 moons, an asteroid of some kind, maybe the red comet from book 2, smashes into one of the 2 moons, and all that fire rains down and covers the world in ash, creating the long night and throwing all the seasons into chaos. Every Targaryen king is telling us this story. Jaime and his sister and Brienne are telling us this story. Azor Ahai and his wife Nissa are all a part of this story. They're all trying to tell you what happened to the moon and the seasons and the stars. And so he's telling us 3 stories in one. It's bananas.
That is wild.
He's insane.
Yeah.
It's also a fantasy version of real life events. I mean, this is nothing more than the War of the Roses, and Westeros is just England flipped upside
the Black
down.
Dinner.
And
the Red Wedding is the Black Dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Just turned up to 11. Everything's turned up to 11. Yeah. Hadrian's Wall is the wall, but instead of a couple stories, Romans, he goes 700 feet.
And made of ice.
Yeah, and I'm that person who's like, what Ned does when he starts us off, he's doing it. He's going to go serve Robb because, that it's the honorable thing to do, and how much Catelyn does not want him to do this. And that you can't help but want, because of what happens to them. I always like when it's the end for Ned, like what he must be thinking that he did this for Robb, for the king, for Robb, and this is the outcome. Like he was trying to do the honorable thing all the way through, and it just ends so badly.
Yep.
And I think that's a little, again, why I read fantasy. I'm like, I want that happy ending, and it's when you ain't getting that.
Martin promises bittersweet ending. Whatever that means.
What does that mean?
It means there'll be some good and some bad. Like you're just gonna have to take it.
Yeah, that's like you'll see. That's like saying we'll see when you ask your parents, "Are we going to do this?" All right, we'll see. Bittersweet, like it'll happen. Maybe, possibly, maybe.
And for who? And who's?
I want a time frame.
Like it all seems like it's going to be just bitter to me. All right, because I do want to start getting into some comparisons, but we got to talk about the show first.
Show next, yes.
All right, so dislike, neutral, like, and love. Anybody a dislike on the show?
And we're just talking seasons 1 through 4.
See, yes, the first half.
There we go.
Seasons 1 through 4, guys. To be clear, 'cause
Anyone
we might
DNF?
have no, everybody
Okay.
watched it, right? 1 through 4. We all watched 1 through 4. Good. No DNFs.
Yeah.
All right. Dislike on the first half. Neutrals on the first half. Like on the first half. And I think Natalie and I are love on the first half. And
with a huge
2 loves and
with a
like
huge
to love.
asterisk.
With a huge asterisk.
With a huge
And
asterisk.
I'm a like to love. I'm definitely a like to love. Natalie and I are there. All right. So you guys, why do we love it?
The first 4 seasons of this show promise what the show failed to pull off in the end. But these first 4 seasons, in my opinion, are incredible adaptations. Any changes that they made were either necessary or improved the product. Layers are missing, sure, but that's the way of adaptations. And I made my peace with that a long time ago. It's just part of, well, this is now on film. It's different. We have to do things differently. Characters that the audience falls in love with become more prominent. This is the nature of television. Fine. Those first 4 seasons are fantastic. I can't think of a single bad episode. I don't have really a complaint about these first 4 seasons, and all of my problems with the series begin in season 5. So, in my opinion, this is the like premier first half of Game of Thrones. This is where it's all at. The first 4 seasons. Masterful.
Excellent.
Yeah, this was absolutely a masterpiece. Going back to, there was the Lord of the Rings before this in the early 2000s, and then all of a sudden jump 15 years later, fantasy and shows that kind of died down, and this completely reinvigorated it by being not just something that feels groundbreaking, not just something that feels like a masterpiece, but something that just completely changed the genre and viewing for everything. Like every network is still trying to find a Game of Thrones.
People are always looking for the next Game of Thrones.
They're more often than not failing, but they're like there's a reason why everybody is trying to recapture what Game of Thrones had. And so going back to that asterisk, there's one issue I have with this, and this is a specific casting. The cast is incredible. Not only the cast who at the time that they were recording, but throughout the series, like all those characters grow, and it's like a Marvel movie where they grow into who they are. Like it's phenomenal to see a decade later that all these characters still are those characters.
But who was it?
Ned.
Really?
Ned, yes, he is fantastic as Ned, but because he because he is Sean Bean, that is
he's gonna die.
That is a walking spoiler, and there is one conversation he has that unraveled the entire series for me because I watched the show first. So I'm like, oh, well, he has this conversation. He's like, well, I'll tell you more when I get back. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. So that means that this is important. And because that's important, that means I know who it unraveled the entire series for me.
There was one trope there that kind of stayed.
And because of that, I'm like, oh, well, he's not the main character. And because this character raised up in my prominence, I'm like, well, so much of this entire series is all about how it's groundbreaking and genre breaking and bending the expectations. But because I can see hey, this character is important, which means that all the other characters who seem like they're important, seem like they're going to be next in line, aren't. That means they're going to be disposable. And because they're disposable, that means they're going to get not. Now, I didn't know how bad things were going to go, but I'm like, okay, well, here's a line of people who are going to have to get out of the way before the actual story can take place. So I didn't see it quite as
interesting.
Not genre breaking, but quite as somebody mentioned it before, but I didn't see as breaking expectations so much as I did just see oh, well, here is exactly what's going to happen next, and then this is going to happen to this person, this is going to happen to this person, until we finally get to the characters who eventually have plot armor. And that doesn't unfold until well after into part 2, but I could see how things were going bad because of one specific character choice. But everything else in this is phenomenal. The music is incredible. The intros are always stunning, and they change as the series evolves. As they move around to different places. There's also a part where one of the castles gets burned down, and then after that in the intro, there's smoke coming off of it, which is really, really cool. But everything about it, like there's just so much care that went into each episode, and they show differences between this and say another recent fantasy series where it's basically just like a patterned shirt of scales, whereas in this one they were wearing like real, or at least seemingly real, it might have been like plastic or something, but they had real like scales on their armor, because that you can't really fake until you get a rubber sword and you're in the middle of battle. But again, that's later on with seasons 5, 6, whatever.
Right.
So,
you know, these first 4 seasons are also the only seasons that George Martin worked in the writer's room, and he wrote an entire episode for each of these first 4 seasons. Some of the best ones as well.
Yep.
So says a lot that, you know, he leaves and just goes downhill, man.
And so, sorry, going back to that, because I watched the first season, then read the books, like I kind of got the hints of who certain characters were, which I probably wouldn't have if I were just reading the books through it, without the show or anything like that. So,
yeah. Natalie, you want to go next on why you're a like to love on this one?
I mean, they kind of named it. I will say, this is going into the differences a little bit, but I actually kind of like that they didn't change much between the books and the show. And I'm also glad they aged up the characters, because I don't think I could have handled that.
Daenerys in particular.
Yeah, that one was rough.
Yeah.
But there was, because they didn't change it, I feel pretty good about it, like seasons 1 through 4. And also, I'm gonna say it, I like the fan base of Game of Thrones because they didn't spoil anything. They just sat there and waited and be like,
for everybody to
I know.
I mean,
there's a lot of videos.
That is the most beautiful fan base ever.
It started the whole reaction video scene. Like reaction videos exist today because Game of Thrones fans like picked up their phone and were like, Ned's head's about to get chopped off. Watch how she freaks out. You know, like when the Red Wedding happened, the world exploded. Like, it's just.
I wasn't even watching the show and I knew about it. And then I was still shocked because I didn't know what episode, what season. So when I watched it, I was like, it was amazing. And then the music, like you brought up, Ben, is just like that. People will play that song at their wedding.
I love that music. That is on my fantasy writing playlist, that Game of Thrones music. It's absolutely
and I just find it great, like how it's incorporated into our culture. I've been watching Suits because that show's finished, so of course that means I'll watch it, and they are referencing Game of Thrones in it, but they're also trying to make it modern day, so of course they're saying we're watching this modern day show as well. And
oh my god, I'm sorry, I just burped on mic. I apologize.
I didn't notice.
I usually am really good at muting, and I just looked out like, oh shit.
It's
a good thing Natalie was talking. I think it kind of.
You're welcome.
Somebody somewhere heard it. Somebody somewhere was like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. I will say my husband and I, because he's read the first 3 books, and we watched episode 1 after the kids went to bed. And I will say, due to the intimate nature of all the episodes, it reminds me of when I try to watch True Blood and rewatch that, like, because it's so intimate so many times, and it almost seems like not to it doesn't add value. It's just like
they coined a phrase for that, like, which we can't say on this channel.
Yeah, and because of that, it's not as good the second time around to watch because I'm just like, fast forward. I don't care.
I found myself doing the same thing. I'm like, I was like,
and that's where in the books I don't care. I'll keep reading because there's something in there or something that it adds value or whatever. But in the show, I'm just like, fast forward. For the second watch, the first watch, I'm like, oh my god, and there's actually, I think it's in the next few seasons, there's a scene that I've just loved and I thought was a total flex. That's why
that is when we get next month. You gotta let us know what it is.
But like to love, I did still that because they followed the characters. They didn't really deviate. They they kept the motivations and stuff, and I'm actually okay with it because it's worked out for like Good Omens follows the books pretty closely. Like I'm okay with following the books because not to be Marshall McLuhan here, but the medium is the message. That by having a different medium movie or show instead of a book, it changes the experience of the reader, of the viewer, and so I'm fine with it.
Yeah. And the reason I think I was a like to love, I didn't start watching Game of Thrones till after the first season was done. Again, I had heard about it, I knew about it, and I knew it was going to be heavy. People were telling me, and it's going to have some themes. I'm like, oh, I'm not a fan of that particular theme or whatever. So like Eva says, every content warning in one series. Yeah, so I'm like, oh, it's just going to be heavy. I don't know. But then once people are like, no, it's really good, you got to watch it. They aged up characters, da 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 da. I'm like, okay, all right. And then I was like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's good. But those things are still there. It's still really, really heavy. If you want something lighter, you want to feel good, it might not be the one, but you're gonna feel. So it's like it's very conflicting, but I'm so it's so conflicting. So I'm so close to love, and of course I love fantastical creatures, and when they can do them and make them look good, and the dragons look good, So I'm like I liked it quite a bit. So I'm a heavy on the like. Even despite some of the themes that I might be like on some of the themes. So let's get into our thoughts on seasons 1 through 4. And so it says movie spoil. Some show spoil. It's like watching a movie, like a long movie when you're watching them all back to back to back. Let's see. Thoughts. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we're gonna start from there. Adrian, take it away. What are your thoughts on the series?
So like
in 10 minutes or less, Adrian.
Yes.
I was gonna say, like, what are we going into here? Episode by episode? Like, what do you want?
You can go world building, characters,
Gotcha.
casting, God, I'm trying to think of the other stuff.
World building, the execution.
I'll fill in the blanks. Okay. Yeah. So having watched the first season before reading any of the books, I have to applaud it for its ambition and the way that it reaches for things that should have been unreachable. For the wall alone is an incredible accomplishment on film, and most of the castles don't look the way you imagine them in the book. In the books, they are far more elaborate for the most part, far more epic, far bigger. They were limited by what they could do with sets, that informed what they were going to do with the effects for the external shots and stuff like that. You can't make it look too big because the sets aren't going to look too big. So things like that. There was, the Battle of the Blackwater in season 2. It's one of my favorite battles in the books. And, you picture it in this very epic way. And there is a lot of epicness about that battle on the show. But there's one scene that like totally takes me out of it, where they're like charging at each other on the sand in front of the walls. And like you can see over the walls, like they're very, very low. And I'm just sitting here going like that, like the way I picture it in the book with these massive walls, and then you see it on the show, it's something that like a guy could like hop over, and it's like the sets don't live up to that, grand expectation. But again, so ambitious. I mean, think about the opening scene and how they set everything up with the White Walkers and with the whites, which is very important to distinct between the two in the books. It's easier with the speech, but again, it's incredibly ambitious. The music, as we mentioned, is incredible. A lot of the cinematography, especially in those early seasons, is very impressive. They go on to do massive battles in future seasons, but they learned how to do them in these first ones, and they experimented and they did really interesting things. There are characters that were cast perfectly, and for many of them, they didn't even need to look like they looked in the in the books. I mean, think about Tyrion after the Battle of the Blackwater, the way he looks in the books and the way he looks on the show. They gave him a scratch on the show because like we have this very handsome, actor here. Let's not ruin his face for the next 5 seasons. So there are these liberties that they have to take, these things that they have to like scale down, and yet it's still on the first watch came off as incredibly epic and ambitious. And that just says a lot for how much grander the books are, because you can sit there and you can watch the show and you can be wowed by everything you're seeing. And no matter how wowed you are, there's a book reader standing over your shoulder going, it's way bigger in the books. Like it's like way bigger. Down to the dragons, all that stuff. So the performances, fantastic. Of course, a lot of the direction is really, really great. These are not, and I don't mean for them to sound like they're flawless seasons of television. No show is ever flawless completely, but
I'm sure there's a subreddit that picks up every single error and like,
I'm sure
flying in the background.
Oh my God, the infamous cup from the last season. That whole thing. Anyway, so it's just really, really interesting to think about how this adaptation takes this grand epic fantasy and makes a grand epic fantasy for you to watch weekly. It was such an accomplishment, something that I hadn't seen on that scale before. I mean, what was the last really great fantasy television show before Game of Thrones? What, Xena?
Lost.
Like, like there's sci-fi up and down, but like epic fantasy.
Lost you didn't feel was fantasy until
Lost you thought was sci-fi until you found out it was fantasy. But that's, and that just speaks to the duality of sci-fi and fantasy and how I always swear by them being two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, and it's interesting because George R.R. Martin was a sci-fi writer before he did A Song of Ice and Fire. This was his first foray into actual epic fantasy. And a lot of the things, the concepts that he comes up with, he comes at them from the lens of a sci-fi writer, like the dragons, like the astronomy stuff that I was talking about, the seasons, all of that stuff is stuff that he worked out as a sci-fi guy, and injected it into this fantasy setting, created the setting out of sci-fi.
That writers need breadth of knowledge.
Read everything, man. Read everything you can get your hands on. Like you can learn from so much. It's why I write genre benders, because like I love how all of these different flavors can influence each other and meld together. And yeah, man, it's like cooking. Like, nobody wants a steak. You want steak with your potatoes and your mac and cheese, whatever it is that you eat with your steak. You want that variety. You want the flavors to dance with each other. And I mean, I think that works wonderfully.
I'm playing Ratatouille in my head. It's like
exactly. That's exactly. Yeah. All the colors just dancing in your brain. The first book is a murder mystery. Who killed John Aaron? That's the whole. Like that's where it kicks off. Who killed John Aaron, and why? Oh, he was looking into the children, and it unravels from there. Mm-hmm. But it starts off as a murder mystery in a fantasy world written by a sci-fi writer.
Yeah. We will talk about Hodor next month because I have feelings.
I got to mentally prepare for that.
Yeah. I know.
It's a doorstop.
I mean, speaking of mentally preparing, so I watched the series before I ever read the book. So I rewatched because I wanted to refresh. And there were scenes where I was just like literally bracing myself because I'm like, I'm not ready to see this happen. I was not ready for the red wedding, even though I kept telling myself I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. I was not ready, but I watched it. The other scene that I wasn't ready for, and I did not watch it, and I was on a backstage. We kind of do stuff like this, but we're backstage and not live sometimes. And so I was on a backstage, and I got to that point, and I just kind of like stopped, and my friends are like, "What are you?" I'm like, "I'm at the part where what's his name? Prince Oberyn." I was so shocked. The scream, the actress, I forget what the actress's name. She did such
curdling.
She literally, she's like this, screaming when what happens to Prince Oberyn. That's me. That was me the first time I watched. I was just not ready. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and I saw it coming too, because I'm like, oh man, he's got it. He's
getting arrogant. Yeah,
he got arrogant, and it's like, I feel like you could see it not in everyone's face, maybe, but I know it was on my face, that oh no moment. And the actor, that was so good. And Tyrion, poor Tyrion, like, you know.
I love his story arc.
I love Tyrion's story.
Can't catch a break like
I'm
that.
always rooting
Give
for,
me a
I'm always
sassy
rooting for
character
him.
that has no BS. I'm there.
Yeah, I was like, Prince Oberyn, he's gonna save Tyrion. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be suck it, Cersei, in your face. Your child was terrible anyway, and then it just all again. Your heroes just don't expect anything good to happen. I was like, man, what a and you don't like the mountain. It's just like, why?
You know what's really great about those moments that you're talking about? Every single one of those moments, the red wedding, the purple wedding, the Oberyn incident, all of these things are wonderful examples of George Martin building and building to a certain moment. And all of these like different storylines are all weaving their way. And then all of a sudden they all collide in this one moment. And when that happens, it's like when you step on an ant among a bunch of other, and they all just freak out and scatter. That's what happens every time one of these big moments happens. Everyone in the entire kingdom just loses their minds, and they all go insane. And they're all like grabbing for power and betraying each other and making new alliances. Everything gets shaken up. The whole like chessboard gets flipped every time he does something crazy like that. And that's just such masterful storytelling, man. That's so good to create this like one like crystallizing moment where like everything changes forever, and to do it over and over again in each book. Ned Stark, boom, that's a huge one, you know.
And some of them are so subtle, and you don't see the trouble coming. When Catelyn chooses to save Jaime, to save her girls, and you're thinking, surely this guy's gonna understand. No, he absolutely is not going to understand, and everything's going to go to crap because of it, Catelyn.
Or when Catelyn takes Tyrion, thinking that's the smartest thing to do in that moment, and how that kicks off more like, war and craziness.
Everything just makes everything worse. I'm just like, you
stop doing things.
Just everybody stop. Literally, just at some point, everybody stop.
Yeah,
two mothers claiming to do everything for the sake of their children, Cersei and Catelyn. Like, I mean, and that's their drive, and they approach it in totally different methods, and it's gosh. I will say with the show though, I mean, cast characters, I'm glad they aged up. I'm glad the world building, working with what they got, and the fact that I could have mentioned this in the books, but it's like you think of a whole world, not just like a little country far off land. No, there's different seasons, different climates in these other places, and it affects their clothing. And then in the book, there was no like languages listed. Someone came up with Dothraki. Like how it sounded. I don't know, it was very Germanic based. But
he had a couple of words in there, but then from those couple of words, they created an entire language.
And they were able to create a language. And to me, that is fascinating and amazing and stuff, because it's right up there. Like, it's going to be the fact that people know Elvish and everything. People are going to know
Klingon.
Yeah, Klingon. Like, we're talking about new languages that were created, and people for fun learn it. And I find that, to me, that's like the sign of like a foundation series. That's why I think it could hold up for many, many years to come, especially if it finishes.
Yes, especially if it finishes. I can't wait till next season, because I want to talk about the what ifs of it all. Because man, oh man.
Then was there? You haven't spoken yet. Was there anything you liked on?
I loved how well they bake in certain moments. And again, you guys basically said everything, the music, the actors, everything. But like, I love how there are so many moments where it's baked in, like, oh, you go to somebody's house and you're in danger until you break bread with them, until you sit down and have a meal with them.
Bread and salt.
And it goes through, it tells you that multiple times. There's multiple situations where it's like, oh, okay, we're safe now. We're safe now. We're safe now. And then we aren't. And
setting a rule and then purposely breaking it. I love that.
And that moment where Catelyn asks, she has to ask for it because he didn't offer it freely, and she's like, that's weird, and she has to ask for it, and he like
Yes.
begrudgingly gives it, and you just have this uneasy feeling like, okay, well, we got it, so
But did we?
are we
Like, that's
good? Like,
Yeah, that's what I feel like.
I don't think we're good.
I feel like you're saying it's okay, but you're
Yeah.
not giving it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and like in the show, it does really well. Like, to have this like close up, and it's like, wait, is that
You're wearing
chainmail
armor,
underneath
yeah.
the sleeve? Yeah, and I
Such a
like,
subtle little thing, because it makes you think. It's like, wait, what does that mean? Like, if you're not already there, it takes you a second to be like, chainmail, battle,
yeah.
bad.
Yeah, but Catelyn
And
gets
then,
it.
and then
Like,
creating the music, because we didn't have a music sheet in the book and everything. Creating the music, and now that music like strikes fear. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so let's
well, I
talk
just want to say
about.
just one last thing is I love how there were so many episodes where it like something drastic will happen and then just cut to black, and that's how the episode ends. So it sets up. I
That's
don't
how
think
the
there's
books.
been
That's how the chapters do. Go.
this series was like a perfect storm, because we mentioned other ones, you know, Lost, True Blood, whatever, where like they were kind of water cooler shows, but I don't think there was or will ever be a show like this that can spread across pop culture and consume our lives as much as this one did, because now we have streaming services and all these other shows where like a show will come
In
out
multiple countries and everything.
Yes.
I think like True Blood was more of a American thing, but multiple countries.
Yeah, because the internet was really like picking up in terms of message boards and all these other services that like people would just sit there and discuss it, and so it would just get exponentially bigger and bigger as each week goes on. But now there's just too many shows coming out and too many different, like, our attention is going different places. So I don't think there will ever be a show that is this wide known and this talked about on a Monday morning. So
Yes.
I mean,
So-
there's a reason, like, I would always watch it like Monday or Tuesday nights or whatever instead of the night of. So I would have to actually walk around with headphones in on Monday mornings, because everyone would be talking about what was going on the night before.
Yeah, so I feel like even if it doesn't become like a Tolkien-esque classic, it is at least going to be that cult classic that has done this phenomenal thing at the very least. But yeah, finishing the series, it could very well, you know, go into that forever. 100 years from now, people are reading it like, whoa, you know, type of situation. But yeah, that cult phenomenon, that was real. It was tangible.
100 years from now, how bad are they going to talk about the CGI then?
Yes.
Oh, it's so horrible. Like
Oh my
us
God.
watching
You can see the thing, and
the 80s version of Lion Witch in the Wardrobe with the hand drawn.
I thought it was so good back then. Also, the same thing with Star Trek, like Next Generation and the OG Star Trek, and you're like, troubles are literally just a little for a toy. But you know, back in the day, though, they're like, it's on a spaceship. Look at the computers, and now it's just like, it's so hard to rewatch. But I'm like, it's so cool though. So yeah, it definitely can do that. And I think if it does like Lord of the Rings, like, to me, Lord of the Rings still holds up visually. As time goes on, it's the cracks are showing, but to have held on for as long as it has, still feeling like I can watch it and be like, "Woo, you know, that looks good."
I can throw on Lord of the Rings Extended Edition pretty much any day and just love every second of it. Yeah, it holds up for sure. Game of Thrones, you know, while it had like the biggest budget in TV history for a while, it was still the biggest budget in TV history. It was still not matching major blockbuster motion picture levels. So yeah, the cracks in the CGI are going to show way more in there. It's also why they shied so much away from the direwolves on the show. You know, the bigger they got, the more it took to animate them believably, and the harder it was to sell the believability, because we know what a wolf looks like. You can sell me on a dragon because I haven't seen a dragon in real life to compare it to. If you can make this dragon look as real as possible, I'm going to buy it. But if you show me a wolf that looks just a little bit weird, I'm not going to buy it. And so they just kind of like shied away from the wolves. By the time they got good enough at the dragons and stuff, in those later seasons, they probably could have pulled off some really great direwolf stuff,
Mhm.
but by then it was just too late. They were all dead. So,
Yeah.
It's
I know.
almost like we were talking about with Lord of the Rings how there was no basis, so that's why we had to give the descriptions that we have of the over descriptions, because there wasn't the internet or people didn't travel really far, so they didn't know what most of these things looked like as a basis of think of a tree, but a really big tree that can move. Like,
Yeah.
didn't really have that basis. But now with the internet and everything, we have a basis, so you kind of, it's a little bit harder to make it believable, like you just stated, of we know what wolves look like. We saw Planet Earth.
Yeah.
Or any
Yeah.
documentary that
we have reference to what a
Yeah.
What
wolf
a wolf
looks like
looks
in real
like.
life.
yeah.
Exactly. I would say, like, going for, oh gosh, I'm reading comments and trying to like keep my own train of thought, because I'm reading Eva's comments too at the same time. The wheel time being an exception. Yeah. So as far as adaptations, I think when you're doing an adaptation, you got to pick your lane and stick with it, so that the reader and the viewers go in knowing, is this a strict adaptation, a loose adaptation, or is this just a reimagining, or a sort of a retelling? And I think this, like some others, Good Omens, it's almost act for act. Like, you can go through the book, and when I was reading the books, I watched the show back when it was on, and then reading the book, I could actually picture we're going through the seasons. So when I rewatched it, to just refresh, it was like boom, boom, boom. Yes. And we'll talk about more of the flipping flipping that when you get later into the seasons. And I feel like that's going to upset your audience. Now, I feel like there's also going to be some people who, if you do a looser adaptation, you go in and tell them, this is a loose adaptation, we're just using themes, the characters are going to be different. They'll still be upset because they want to see their book on screen. But as you could see with some of the earlier chat, people kind of get upset. They're like, well, it's just like it, so why am I going to go?
Yeah,
So it's like, you can't.
you're
make
not gonna
everybody
please.
happy.
Yeah, there's gonna
So
be
I'm like,
one side
pick
or the
your
other.
lane. Yeah, I'm like, pick your lane and stick with it. That way,
Yeah.
if you've already upset, half the viewership,
Don't worry
because
about
it's
those. Stick with
exactly
the guys
like
you
it.
like.
Just do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Don't switch it up later on, because then you're just going to make everybody upset.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm good with either. Like, if you want to just do a loose retelling and use just themes and change up the characters, I'm fine with that. Let me see what you got, but tell me that's what you're doing. And we're good. Tell me that's what you're doing, and we're golden. I'm going in and I'm like, okay, let me see what you did with this. But
and on that train of thought, you have Game of Thrones as this actually like really great example of just an adaptation, because they are telling the same story and they are using the same characters to do it, but they're doing it on a TV show, and TV shows have limitations. And so if an actor falls ill or passes away, God forbid, or if somebody spoils what happens next season, and now you got to things come up like that, right? Challenges
that was a
come
huge
up
problem
like
with
that.
Lost, where characters were getting in trouble with the law, and like one flag, and
they had to write characters off the show.
Yes.
Exactly. And so you look at it as, okay, so there's a Song of Ice and Fire, which is the novel version of these events, and then you have a Game of Thrones, which is the TV version of these events, and they are the same events, but because of the two versions being so different mediums, you just have to go in knowing, okay, Tyrion's mistress, whose name is escaping me for some reason right now, is a much bigger part in the show than she is in the books, and she's portrayed as a more fleshed out character on the show than in the books, because
Shay.
people thank you, Shay, because people grew attached to that character on some level. Same thing with Bronn. Think about Bronn, how small his role is in the books compared to what a huge part he became on the show, because that actor is so charismatic that he just seized the audience, and you have to utilize that. Like you have to. And so,
and then they left out other things.
It's interesting.
Like,
dude, the direwolves is the biggest thing that's missing.
I love
the relationship between the Starks and their direwolves would have made that show a million times better than it was.
Yeah,
that connection is missing.
I'm fine with leaving out a few things, like the mom's name, Catelyn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Catelyn. All right. I always want to say Catherine. That's another thing. Reading the books, I made up so much names. When I had the actual physical books, which I do. I will say, like, I usually get audiobooks and stuff, and then if I really like it, I'll get the physical. Or if my husband really wants to read it, he just gets the physical no matter what. Yeah. But how her story develops after the Red Wedding and such, which I believe I might be going ahead, but like that's a major thing that got left out, that they didn't keep. And I think I'm jumping ahead, so sorry about that. But I'm fine with what they left out because you only got an hour. I feel like they hit the major things. I'm glad they aged up the characters. They still made things uncomfortable, like Arya developing and stuff, and her character and killing people in the circumstances that she found herself in that made her do that. But the story arc is still good. I'm not upset about the differences, honestly. Even with the direwolves, I'm not upset. It's
not upsetting to me. Yeah, you're right.
Seasons 1 through 4,
so enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. I feel like what if you know, then you understand that there's some things cinematography wise that they're just not going to be able to do, even with CGI. So there's going to be some limitations, even with a close adaptation.
What are your guys' like favorite cliffhanger endings? Maybe not cliffhanger endings, maybe but they would have, we mentioned it already, these kind of like cut to black moments at the end of episodes, like when Jaime loses his hand.
That was probably the best one.
That's a really good one.
I was just thinking, when Jaime lost his hand. Yeah.
That's a really good one. Because
it's literally, you just see the thing go up and it's, you hear it and it's black.
Well,
and it's like,
it's actually, there's a breath.
Yeah. Like a fraction of a reaction.
Scream. Yeah, you see her scream, but it's like
you hear the knife hit, so you know that it's happened, but it takes you a second to see that the hand is removed from the arm, and Jaime looking at the hand and then screaming,
and then boom.
I'm just saying, I think they took the Sopranos cut to black and they were like, let's just do this every episode.
Well, they nailed it for those first 4 seasons, man. They had some really, really good ones.
Yeah. I think that there were a couple of Tyrion one-liners after something happens. There's a Tyrion one-liner and then boom, we're out. It's just like, yeah.
Another good one was Golden Crown, where Daenerys' brother gets the gold.
That was good.
And then her line.
I did not see that coming. I'm like,
cut to black. You're just like, ooh, like you feel it, man. You feel when she delivers that line, you feel it in your bones, man.
Yeah.
She
with her brother, I'm like, how did how arrogant must you be to not realize you just put yourself in a terrible situation by pointing that sword at her pregnant belly, dude?
He was my first hatred.
Yeah,
hate from start to finish.
Yeah, he was
you never forget your first.
Yeah.
Oh man. Now here's something interesting. The first season adapts the entire first book. The second season adapts the entire second book. Because the third book is so big, only the first half of the third book is season 3. And the second half plus more is season 4. And it creates this really interesting thing between those 2 seasons, because you have the big climactic moment in the Red Wedding towards the end of season 3, episode 9, and then a nice little recap, resolution rather, on the final episode of that season. But then, because we're still in the same book, more monumental stuff happens very early in season 4. Joffrey is like episode 2.
Yes, episode 2.
It throws everything off because prior to season 4, it was always a slow build every season. You start off, nice, get lay of the land. Where is everybody? What's the adventure this season? Build, giant climactic moment, wrap it up. And then season 4 is like climactic moment, episode 2, and you're like, like it changed everything and made the show move at a clip in season 4.
Because I hadn't read the books when I first when that happened, I'm like, I literally think I had the thought of they're doing this already. I mean, I was kind of happy, but I was like, if they're doing this, I literally
what's coming?
Yeah, what's gonna happen?
What's coming? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh man, it's like brace yourself. We're letting you know things are gonna go down. And I really liked is it Marjorie and her aunt and her brother, or grandmother and her
grandmother?
brother.
Yeah.
Grandmother.
Yeah.
Like them a lot. And
the grandmother to me was like
Queen of Thorns.
Even more sass than in the show. Like,
oh yeah. She's a force to be reckoned with. Anybody who can sit in the same room as Tywin Lannister and just put him in his place. Are you kidding me? Like, that woman is a Terminator. She's a robot.
She's so fantastic. And I love how in the show we see all the stuff that Littlefinger does. And you're like, oh, he totally the way that he sets up I feel like he sets up Sansa. I don't know if everybody feels that way.
Of course.
And she doesn't even catch on. Like, he takes the necklace off her after killing the guy who saved her, smashes the thing, and then throws it on. I would be questioning things, but I still don't fully understand.
But she's a child.
Realize it, or is it she's really a child? She's totally just gullible. Because I'd be like, oh, why?
Well, remember,
well, she also was a Stark, so she was born to not know any of the intrigue or to really catch up on that. She grows into it.
They didn't live there. They didn't grow up there. So
it's twofold. Not only was her father the most apolitical person in Westeros running a kingdom, he, had his family up there in the north. They were so far away from all of that stuff in the south. All those countries in the south are very close together. And then you have all of the north, and they're way up there. And it's like, you might as well be on the other side of the world. They don't know what's going on down there. And then on top of that, she was raised as a lady. She's going to be the Lady of Winterfell, and she's all about princes and princesses and, castles and balls and blah, blah, blah. She has no idea what the real world is. And when she gets it hard and fast, and she has to learn really quick how to survive. And to her credit, she does. She learns how to survive. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Whatever you say. Where do I sign? Absolutely. What do you want me? Over there? Okay, there I am. She just did what she was told. She kept her head down. She minded her own damn business and just tried to survive any way that she could. So in moments like that, where she is so young, so naive, so sheltered, and now so traumatized, I can forgive her for not picking up on those little things,
Yeah. And the girl went through a lot. Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, her character progression is one of the few shining highlights of next week. So we'll again, I keep saying we'll get into this more, but it's impossible to talk about now without talking about where they're going, and
especially for a character like Sansa. You're right, because
she learned a lot from Littlefinger and from all the other characters around.
Yeah, and I feel like we got to see her in survival mode when she's living there with them. Like they're, especially Joffrey is just literally having these guards beat the crap out of her, and she is literally in survival mode. Nope, I'm loyal to Joffrey. And you're just like inside you're screaming, no girl, but no girl, and then what? You tell her, no girl, get out of there. Where's she going?
Yeah, where's she gonna go?
Where Cersei's not going to find
surrounded by guards with swords, and they're all pointed at her. Where is she going to go?
And just no matter who asked her, nope, I'm loyal to Joffrey. And it's like, it's gut wrenching, and you're just like, you just want to be like, girl, no, run. But then it's like, where's she going to run? Run where? Anyone's going to hand her back over to them anywhere she goes. So just not knowing who who to trust and just sticking to the script. They're beating me, they're torturing me, they're making me look at my dad's head. Doesn't matter. I'm sticking to the script because I need to survive.
The moment that broke my heart the most for her was when she got her period for the first time and tries to burn her mattress.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not marrying that monster.
Oh, you poor thing.
Oh no.
Jump out the window. Just jump.
Yeah. You know,
spoilers.
I thought she was going to do it. I thought she was going to do it the time when he was made to look at her.
And
her father's bed.
Sansa's like, a great example.
She's going to go and she's going to take Joffrey with her.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I feel like she was just like on the edge at that moment.
We were hoping. Yeah. No, I on my first read through of the books, especially in the first two, I think Sansa were my least favorite chapter. I was always annoyed when I got to Sansa because, she's a teenage girl. Yes. She's naive. She doesn't get it. And you're just like, please get it. And you just want to get to the next chapter. But on the second, oh my gosh. Like if you didn't like, that's the thing. If you didn't like a certain character's chapters, if you read them again, I think you might feel differently. Because for example, with the Bran, you mentioned Bran chapters being your least. I love Bran chapters, especially now, but on my first read through, I was probably like, I didn't really like them. Now, what you have to realize is that all of the magical realm backstory stuff is all happening in his chapters from the beginning, from the very start. So if you want to know what all this magic stuff is all about, what's really going down, what's going to happen, what's coming, Bran chapters is where it's at. All the way from when he fell from the tower or was pushed, and then has like that fever dream, and the raven is watching him. The three-eyed raven like shows up there. Three-eyed crow is three-eyed crow in the books. Three-eyed crow shows up, and it's from the jump, like it's all there. You just have no idea what it is on the first read through. When you go in the second one, you're picking up all that stuff.
So let's get into all of that stuff, because I know we have a kind of a cutoff at 2 so that we can get Ben where Ben needs to go. So you mentioned some of this earlier, and now we're talking about, with Bronn, how once you've gone through it the first time, you can go back and it's really more pronounced. All of these little things. Tell us some more, because I'm genuinely curious, because
I'll tell you this.
Through reading, I'm like still like, what's happening? Because I don't know what the show did.
That's the thing, is it's there. Like when you're reading it, even if you're not picking up on all the astronomy stuff, you know that there's something else going on, and you're trying to figure it out. You maybe not know what that is, but you're searching for it. He writes them beautifully, man. These books. As far as the mythical astronomy stuff, I am mostly regurgitating somebody else's great work. There's a YouTube creator. Excuse me, his name is Lucifer Means Lightbringer, because that is what Lucifer actually means. But it's always really weird when you have to tell people, just go to the channel Lucifer Means Lightbringer. What? So on that channel, he dissects all of this mythical astronomy stuff that Martin is doing in the books. And it comes down to a lot of like iconography that happens over and over. Things always happen in towers. Cersei burns down a tower. Bran gets thrown from one. The Sansa's whole thing. Like there's just like all these things matter metaphorically, and so he just keeps throwing them in there. And as he's building Daenerys in the east, and he's building Jon up in the north, and these two forces are going to come together, he's taking his sweet time, layering in all of this other stuff. Every time that you hear people talking about Azor Ahai, you should be thinking sun, moons, comets, stars. That story means that. It's not a character that lived and did a thing. It's an event that happened, much like the flood, in our world, where every culture has a story about a great flood. We know a great flood happened at some point. You have the Christians talking about it. You have Asians talking about it. Everybody talks about it. Everybody has their stories. And so there are these events that the entire world knows about. Everybody knows about the Long Night. Everybody knows about Azor Ahai. He might be called different things. He might be called the last hero. He might be called this, that, or the other thing, but they're all talking about the same dude. And
they just reference it differently.
They're referencing it differently. And it's because they're all adapting these events into their own versions, their own stories. Oh, the moon is not a goddess. It's an egg. And, you know, like somebody devised that story because they were trying to understand what happened to the moon. And so that's the whole mythical astronomy thing. And it ties very much into the magical characters of the story. The Starks being tied all the way back to the First Men and even further to the Children of the Forest. Mm-hmm. The Targaryens being tied all the way back to Valyria and the magic from there and the dragons and all that stuff. It's all just astronomical events happening in real stories with real people. So suffice it to say that this particular gentleman on his channel has hours and hours and hours of this stuff where he will go chapter by chapter, character by character, storyline by storyline. He will like break it down for you. He does it on podcasts. He does it on here. So I definitely recommend checking him out. Again, Lucifer means Lightbringer. What I'm talking about today is a very condensed, just giving you the basic idea. He'll dive way into it and just start at the very beginning because you need the foundation. The weirwood trees are tied into it. It's all one big story, and it will give you like new eyes when you read these books again. You're going to read them like you're reading them for the first time. Those brand chapters, you're going to devour them like candy because they're just chock full of stuff. There's moments where like he hears the trees leaves moving and he thinks that it sounds like a voice speaking to him. It is a voice speaking to him. Like, that's real. So like when you reread it, man, like those things like really, really pop.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I'm gonna definitely go to his channel because I there are things that I feel like I have questions. There's things I definitely want to know.
He is way deep into it now. I don't recommend just diving into whatever his latest.
Start way back in the beginning.
Start at least, and then after you have like a solid foundation, then jump around and read what you're interested in. Absolutely, because you know he'll focus on Arya or he'll focus on and like if you have favorite characters or things that you want to know about, absolutely. But there's a good like 5 or 6 video series at the beginning that you should probably
Yeah, but I feel like these are the characters that I wonder about the most. I feel like I don't know where George R.R. Martin wanted to go with Bronn, but I feel like I get it with the way that they end it. But there's like things I'm like I don't get the way that they ended things, and we'll get into later. But like with Daenerys, I'm like, as I'm reading with these first 4 books, I'm feeling like this is going to be Arya, Bronn, Jon, and especially Daenerys. I feel like I don't know why I feel like they should all be the last ones standing, or that somehow because she went into the fire. Like I feel like that's magical. Okay.
Yes. But that moment is misinterpreted by a lot of readers because of the show. On the show, they ran with that moment as Daenerys is fireproof. Okay. That's not the case.
I know in the book, it's like the fire and the smoke is just consuming everything. So she's not
she walks into the fire in the books, but that moment in the books is a blood ritual. She is performing witchcraft in that moment. She is sacrificing a life. She's burning a body. She put the eggs there, and she's the third. And those 3 add up to the 3 eggs. She's performing blood magic in that moment. It's a one-time occurrence that in later seasons, they have that moment where she again burns down like the whole hut or whatever and walks out unscathed. I don't think that moment is going to happen in the books because she's not inherently fireproof in the books. She performed a magical act. She may not understand what she's doing, but that's what she did. And we learn through context clues through the rest of the series that in order to get this magical thing to happen, you have to sacrifice this other very real thing.
And we do that with the
red woman. Absolutely. What was his name? Who's riding around with the Fellowship?
Form. It
Beric
starts with B.
Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion. Thank you very much for getting me there. Beric Dondarrion. Yes.
I'm saying form here. That's wrong.
You were close. You got me there. So that's a very interesting, thing to talk about, because
because
that's one of
I
those things that the
too.
show like muddled,
Yeah, I too would be like, Daenerys is the one who's making all of the stories come true. This is, and I don't know if I feel like I was lied
So
to.
You weren't, but this is where it gets really interesting, because you have so many things where it's like the three-headed dragon. There are three people who are always the important ones.
Yes.
And so it's like three people. This is why I love the whatever I said before, the water cooler talks.
Yeah.
Where you have three people. So it was supposed to be Tyrion, Jon, and Daenerys. That's like the rumor of they were going to be the three-headed dragon who were going to basically come through and save everyone. They were going to save people from the invading north. They were going to bring peace to the realm, relative peace to the realm. And if you get a union between the three of them, then you would essentially stop most of the wars, and they would have the dragons to go along with it. And so, so there are so many moments where if you can get these three people together, then that's the powerful moment. And at least in this part one, that's what it looks like it's setting up in my mind, at least, and in all the conversations and discussions.
Well, you have that particular prophecy, the three-headed dragon, right? Three heads has the dragon, and so many readers are focused on figuring out the three heads of the dragon. Clearly, Daenerys, Jon, who's the third. Tyrion is a very big contender, but not confirmed. We don't know that for sure. That's speculation on all of our parts.
You're right.
It's probably
rumors and discussions.
It's probably Tyrion, but we don't know. But that's not the only prophecy, right? Then you have the prophecy of Azor Ahai and him coming back and everything. And if you look at the acts, the miracles that he's supposed to perform, both Daenerys and Jon individually fit the role of Azor Ahai. And if that's the case, should the third head of the dragon also fit the role? And should we be looking for that? Or are these two completely separate prophecies? Or do they not matter because humans are dumb and we just make stuff up, and maybe the prophecy isn't real at all? Like, there's just so much to play with in there.
Part two.
Right. But so there's so much to play with in there. And it's this very interesting idea of like these characters' lives filling in these puzzle pieces. And once all the pieces are in place, we'll see the big picture and we'll know. But until then, we're just kind of guessing what the big picture is. And I love that. It's very interesting.
Are you not too rooting for the ones that you think it's them? Like, I think it's Jon. I think Tyrion. Is it Tyrion? Because Tyrion is also one of my favorite characters. Daenerys. And she's so separate from everything,
which is why she's on a villain arc that people are missing. She is so separate, and she's stewing, and she's going through crazy trauma, and they fumbled it on the show, absolutely, and we'll talk about that in the next part. They fumbled that on the show, but I do think that's where it's going, and I think it's going to get there in a much more cohesive way.
With more logical explanation, because we've
already seen a lot of madness in her in the books, like her hallucinations. Like, she's not okay up there.
Well, and then there's a family history there as well, which could
flip a coin, greatness or madness, right? Like every Targaryen.
Yeah. And I was talking with some of my friends about this because they knew I was going to be doing this, but it's almost like when they said flip a coin, it seemed like that flip a coin is they're born this way. And so it seems like that would fit more her brother, not her, because she didn't seem like, at least not to me. And I'm like, was I missing it?
I love these books. I love them.
I bet you do. You're like, oh, let me tell you.
There's a reason why so many people name their kids Daenerys.
Yeah, well, they regretted that after the final season, I'll bet. But anyway,
I also named my dog Loki. So here's the thing: we might get a Daenerys.
So you asked me if I root for the ones who I think are the prophecy fulfillment. My theory, again, not my original theory, again regurgitating things that I learned and put together with other people, but I don't think that Azor Ahai was a hero. I think he was a villain. And I think that his whole like big blood sacrifice is what caused the moon to be struck and destroyed, and he started the long night, not ended it. And if any of our characters is in fact Azor Ahai come again, then they're bringing the long night, not preventing it. So we have to root for them to not be Azor Ahai. But again, that's just interpretation. Yeah, I could be way wrong, but the clues that I'm picking up, that's where it's sending me for sure.
All right, gotcha. All right. Oh my gosh, I think we might be not doing too bad on time. Okay. Best and worst changes.
I feel like we covered that.
Yeah. Do you have any favorites or
rapid fire?
Yeah.
I'll disagree with Adrian, and we can go into this much more better in part 2 because they have a better example of this. But Blackwater, I did not like that battle.
In the books or in the show?
In the show.
Oh no, yeah, I think it pales in comparison to the books.
That's exactly.
But I do love it still.
It was a masterful stroke of genius in the books of showing Tyrion is a brilliant tactician, and that's what like carries through for his character development.
Yes.
When the show, I understand there's budgetary concerns, but I don't remember what the solution was. But I watched a YouTube.
It was just the wildfire. They took away the chain.
I watched a YouTube show of somebody explaining like how they could have done it better using the same amount of money, using the same like stuff, and whatever he said, it's years and years past, but it all made sense to me. But in the show, it's basically just like, hey, we're going to sail one boat at a giant sea and then just fire one single arrow to take out an entire navy. And like, I think in the books there was like intentional sinking of his own ships that then crashed into everything else. And it was like this huge thing. There was the chain which trapped them in the bay itself. And then the show.
The best part was how the chain was just on the surface of the water. So then all the debris from the destroyed ships got stopped by the chain and created this wobbly bridge over the water where knights are like standing and like fighting and like, there's fire and like amazing. That battle was and the way it was switching between Tyrion's point of view, Cersei's, Sansa's, and like we're getting like all these different sides of like what's happening.
Exactly. And in the book, that is such a pivotal moment for so many different characters, and in the show it's just like, okay, well, that happened. It's
the best that they could do in season 2. They didn't have that money yet. They didn't have the Battle of the Bastards money just yet.
Again, I watched a YouTube video and I don't remember any of the details. I'm sorry, but it explained everything of like how they could have done it better,
right?
With the same amount of money to do, the CGI or whatever. So
well, hindsight 2020.
We could always play Monday quarterback with any show or.
If I had done it, I would have had all the answers.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't.
It's difficult to start with like what the equivalent of a blank slate and everything. As we're talking about, I wanted to make sure I bring this up. As we're talking about like good overviews and playbacks, if anybody wants to do this, The Ringer did a podcast of every single Game of Thrones episode, and they summarize the episode, talk about like the best and worst changes to the book and everything and what happened, and as well as including little Easter eggs of what's going to happen. And it was very thorough. And I remember eating those up back in like 2017. So
nice.
And my son wants me.
Yeah. Piggybacking on what she just said, the two different points. Number one, I like to judge an adaptation, especially an adaptation, by how well it pulls off what it tried to do versus how well it pulled off the book or whatever it's adapting. Because again, the Battle of Blackwater is a perfect example where if they were trying to accomplish what was on the page, they failed. But they weren't. They were trying to do their Battle of the Blackwater and make it as good as they could with what they had. And so I judge it on that. And again, I missed the chain. I miss all that stuff, like all the build, especially the way that it builds up through that whole book with Tyrion constantly talking about the chain and checking up on it. And you have absolutely no idea what this chain is for until he uses it. And you go, it's just very well done. I miss it wholeheartedly. But anyway, and then to her, your second point, which I'm already blanking on, what was the second thing that you talked about after that? I already forgot.
the Ringer podcast, maybe.
No, it was before that. Never mind. I'll remember later.
Dude, it was 5 minutes ago. I forgot already.
Yeah,
My son's been asking me to play golf with him on the Nintendo Switch for the past
Tell him he's
hour.
got 10 minutes. We're almost done.
Yeah.
Sorry. Best and worst changes. The worst changes was losing the direwolves. The connection between the Starks and the direwolves is something that's sorely missed in the show. Best changes, aging up the characters, as we mentioned, was one of the better things that they could have done. And letting actors grow into their characters. Again, Braun comes to mind. The kids really all grew into their characters quite well. Arya, by the end of this thing, is a little ninja. It's so amazing. So best and worst. It pretty much comes down to that,
Yeah, I would say that's it for me. The dire wolves, like when you have a fantasy, I really, and especially when you're going to introduce those type of characters, dire wolves, dragons, if they're in the book, I kind of want to see them, but I also understanding, that what the limitations are helps with okay, I get it. And then there were some subtle changes that I liked, little things like they just would rearrange a little bit how a scene plays out. Again, Tyrion's one of my favorite characters, so I focus a lot on his scenes, but the way that he meets the prince, it made for a little bit of humor when the prince's entourage shows up and the prince isn't there. He's already in the city, getting busy, so it let a little bit of levity in that plays well on TV. To see Tyrion standing there being super awkward, trying to formally introduce, and it's they're like, yeah, dude, he's not here. Can we just go? Tyrion's like, well, diplomacy, there you go. So just a little those little types of things where they just need to change the scenes up a little bit. But you literally still get exactly the same thing that was in the book. It's just they switched up the scene just a little bit. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Here's another example: the purple wedding. The golden wedding. Tyrion and Sansa's wedding, where on the show, Joffrey, little piece of crap that he is, takes the stool away. In the books, it was more about Sansa refusing to kneel down for him.
Yes.
She would refuse. She was just the only rebellion that she could do in this moment was not kneel down to make it easier for him to put the cape on her. Little things like that change the dynamic of that scene. In the books, it's about Sansa and Tyrion and her rebellion in this moment. And on the show, it's about Joffrey being a little shit again.
Yeah.
But they really wanted to. I feel like they bumped it to 11 on a lot of things. I'll be.
Natalie Locke shared David Lightbringer's channel
YouTube,
in the chat.
as well as I shared its binge mode. It's created by The Ringer, but they called it binge mode. Binge mode has done all the Marvel movies. It's done Game of Thrones. It's done all the Harry Potter.
Check that out.
It is thorough.
Oh, that is good to know. So
Dope.
That is in the chat, so we can check that out later. Let us go ahead because we're really pushing on that 2 o'clock time for Eastern. Final thoughts, guys. Anything that you feel like you wanted to convey about the first half of Game of Thrones that you didn't get to say?
I'm utterly stunned that they were able to make it into a show and make it into such a successful and incredibly well-developed show. In reading this, I don't even know how I would start.
Yeah.
This would be a hard pitch. The multi-point of view, the vastness, the fantasy, that boardroom,
killing off your main character season 1.
I mean, it was because a lot of people like myself never heard of the books until the show came out. So it was. I think I'm surprised they greenlight it. So.
Yeah, I remember when the show was going to come out. I lived with a roommate. His name is Tom. He's a really good friend of mine. And a big movie guy, big TV guy. Just nothing made him happier than just staying home all day and watching movies and TV or going out to the theater or whatever's on that week. And he saw trailers for Game of Thrones, and he was the one telling me like, dude, we got to check this out. It premieres on Sunday. We got to watch this thing. And I watched the trailer and I was like, okay, yeah, it looks all right. I don't know. One episode and I was like hooked. I mean, Jamie, the last thing that happens in episode 1 is Jamie pushes Bran out the window and you're just like, okay, this is something else. We need to see what happens here.
Yep.
So yeah, man, kudos to them. Kudos to them for getting, the adaptation greenlit in the first place. They had to get it by George Martin and he put his baby in their hands. Like the fact that any of this happened is a freaking miracle. And, and then there's the second half.
Yeah, then there's the second half.
Spoilers for next month.
August 20th. Come
tuned.
join us for part 2. So stay tuned.
We're not holding back.
No. We have
I won't
thoughts.
either.
We have feelings.
I have many.
Yes, I do too. I
Deep
do
and
too.
heartfelt down in my bones. But 1 through 4, woo!
Yeah. So, yay, if you love the whole thing, this is the episode to watch. Next one. If you hated it, watch the next one.
Oh. Whew.
All right, because it things happened. I would love. I'm eyeballing Adrian's book set, and I do like to collect my book sets. I have them up at the top. But I'm like, I need that last book. Like
There's
my
2 more coming.
OCD.
2 more.
The 2 more. I need it to happen.
Just don't hold your breath because you might pass out.
It feels weird. Weird. I'm like, what if I buy it and it looks beautiful like these, and then the last 2 don't match? You guys, the way I will shun a mismatched book.
I'll buy a
is
new
not
box
even
set. I
funny.
don't care. I'll buy a new box set with all set. I don't care. I actually think that we may see the Winds of Winter next year. I honestly think that it's going to happen. And I know that everyone's going to tell me I'm crazy. I have reasons. They are internet stalky, but I have reasons.
What connection do you have to George R.R.?
I know. I'm just like,
no, I have my ear to the grindstone, so to speak, and certain very fishy things have been happening in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire publications, and it's usually the kind of fishy things that happen right before he announces the release of a book, and so I don't know. I have a feeling.
all right.
I have a feeling.
I will be mildly hopeful then. I'm not gonna get my hopes up too
Winds of
much.
Winter 2024. Woo!
Oh my gosh. All right, guys, let's
Keep
go ahead
hoping,
and
Adrian.
do
Keep
our,
hoping.
yeah, right. Let's go ahead and do our outros. We'll start with Adrian, our guest for today, and then we'll swing it around. Then Natalie, and I'll close it out.
Thank you very, very much for having me. This was so much fun, a pleasure and an honor and a privilege. And I am a writer. I write books. This is a murder mystery set in a sci-fi fantasy world. This is the short story prologue that leads into the events of this novel. And book 2 is coming in the next 2 years-ish. So pick them up. Ebook, paperback, booksbyadrian.com. Signed copies available. And I hope you guys will check out my channel if you haven't already. I love to interview other authors, many of whom on this panel I've been on. I haven't had you yet, but I'm coming for you.
Soon. She's muted. You're muted.
And thank you.
I'm always
Thank you guys
muted with him
very
around.
much.
Yeah.
And
Handsome
again,
boy.
I'm Ben Pick. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, I give questionable writing advice. Oh, thank you. Perfect. I actually have my own little Kindle here. And this is
Because you have 2 out so far. Yeah.
I do have, yep. So it's in black and
Show
white. The
up.
cover actually looks pretty beautiful.
Waiting for the series to finish, Ben. Don't leave me hanging.
Well,
Yeah, y'all are setting the bar with these covers on how beautiful they are. I'm just saying.
I don't take 5 to 10 years to get those out there. And yes, Adrian also has fantastically lovely covers too, with a lot of meaning thrown in there to set the genres, which he talked about in his videos. But tomorrow night, I'm actually going through
5 more minutes.
on my episode about being an introvert on YouTube. So how do I make it work? And hopefully I'll see you there. I guess
That sounds fun.
Natalie?
I guess I gotta hold this down until she comes back. But I'm Natalie Locke. With the binge mode thing, I do want to state that on Spotify it says only 6. It covers seasons 1 through 6. No, it covers all 8. I think they like started when the show was coming out, and then they had to go back and do like 7 and 8 separate. But it is thorough. Every single episode is one episode of the podcast, so I enjoyed that. And then of course I shared David Lightbringer's YouTube channel, so you can go through there and go to the beginning and have that in-depth dive. Other than that, my website's Natalie Locke Books, and June 2024 is when my prompt book with Chandra Arthur will be coming out. So please don't X out. Okay.
Oh, I'm back. I kicked myself off my own screen.
It's okay. We carried on.
You did. You guys, that's why I have you guys here. I need you guys. Y'all are awesome. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Adrian, for agreeing to do this with us. You are awesome. Thank you for all of the tidbits and the insight. You guys, we will be back, like I said, August 20th, round 2. Don't miss it. And of course, on the replay, if you have comments, go ahead and leave those comments down below if you're watching on the replay. And I will see you guys next time. Let me find my thing so that we can, like, my screen is like giant now. So good luck finding anything. Has that ever happened to you where your screen just does like weird things and you're like, I can't even find my chat. So let me see if I can even close us out. Like, where is my chat?
Well, we're just going to be here forever then.
Yeah, we really are. Like, I have only the screen.
Then you're not allowed to leave.
Not.
Full screen. There we go. I had to make it full screen and then exit full screen, and everything's back where it's supposed to be.
It's like restarting it.
Yeah, I was not about
turning it off and back on.
Right? Thank you guys again. Y'all have been amazing, and we'll see you next time. Everybody wave.
Bye.